The parent company of British Gas, Centrica, has reported another jump in profits. The company delivered an annual profit of £606 million last year. That's up from £544 million in 2011, an increase of 11%. And there's concern over the size of the increase after customers' bills went up by 6% at the end of last year.
What I can say is we do what we can to keep bills down. In fact, we did increase our prices last year at the very end of the year in November. So it didn't actually impact our profits in 2012. We increased by 6%, which was actually the lowest of all the suppliers, because we're really trying to keep bills down for customers, because we know they're under pressure. Yes. It's actually £50 per household. That's about a 5% margin that we're making for the supply of gas and electricity to customers. So it's it's a relatively small amount versus a total bill.
So, should this profit be celebrated or decried? Joining me now are George Monbiot, who is an environmental campaigner, and David Cox from the London Energy Consulting Group. I mean, George Monbiot, profits up 11%, consumption, because it's been a cold winter, up 12%. Anything wrong with that?
Well, I don't think it's entirely coincidental that the 6% rise in consumer bills is followed by a 6% rise in dividends. From my point of view, it looks as if they're taking money from the poor and giving it to the rich. And this is part of a global context where corporations are taking more and more profits, they're squeezing their workers' pay, they're raising bills, and the shareholders and the directors are doing very well indeed.
Of course, price increases are regulated. Did they need to put up?
Well, they're not actually regulated. There's a supposedly competitive market with 5 or 6 energy companies. Essentially, they look at each other and they tend to track each other's prices. The problem is they all have similar cost base, so they have similar energy purchase costs, similar IT admin costs, and we end up with quite similar prices for consumers being offered to us. Is it a bad thing that they make money? I don't think it is. I think we need viable, profitable companies.
The question is how much money? Do they need to be taking, I think it's £10 million in bonuses? Do they need to be giving such a big dividend?
Well, the bonuses, I think, are one thing, but the profitability of the energy companies are about the same as supermarkets. They're not extortionate. And British Gas or Centrica at least pay, along with the other energy companies, a decent amount of tax, unlike some of the Amazons and Starbucks that seem to pay very little tax. So I think they're paying 800 million this year into the exchequer. So, you know, they're a profitable British company, and they're making money and they're paying taxes. I quite like that.
I mean, if you believe in a market economy, a capitalist system, I mean, this rate of return doesn't seem to be exorbitant, or is it?
Well, British Gas go on about how they need all this profit in order to invest, although, of course, a lot of it is being diverted off into the pockets of shareholders and directors. But yes, they ought to be investing, but they're simply not making the investments which we desperately require. In other words, getting out of gas and into a low-carbon economy. They're frittering away the money. They're frittering it away either on just going further and further into gas or on giving it away. This is money which a lot of people find very hard to pay. And if they are going to be taking a lot of money out of people's pockets, it should be going to the right places. At the moment, it is not.
That is a fair point, isn't it? I mean, we have had MPs recently reporting on the fact there's going to be an energy gap. We're not, whether it's renewables, as George Monbiot.
I think that was slightly over-exaggerated by Ofgem, the regulator, last week. I don't think the numbers really stack up. But certainly the energy companies...
You don't think there's going to be a gap in power supply in this country?
I think it depends on getting the government reorganising the entire electricity industry with their so-called electricity market reform. A lot more detail needs to be put on the table before the energy companies can invest. And we know Centrica recently have pulled out of new nuclear investment, and they're leaving it for EDF, owned by the French government, to pursue that. But we need more detail in the energy reorganisation in this country in order to get the investment made. So there's a potential gap, but I don't think there's anything like the potential gap that Ofgem were claiming.
But gap or no gap, the key thing is to meet the climate change targets, and at the moment they're not going nearly far enough or fast enough in doing that. And as far as, unfortunately, both the companies like British Gas and the government are concerned, the answer's gas. What was the question? They are simply not being serious about their long-standing promise to get into renewables and to deal with the climate change crisis.
But at the same time, if your priority is what you call a transfer from the rich to the poor, actually these sources of carbon energy are quite a low-cost way of doing it compared to renewables.
Well, actually, it's interesting that the great majority of the rise in energy costs has been because of the rise in the price of gas. And whatever fracking brings, which is always hailed as this great promise, never quite in this country seems to be likely to materialise. We're still likely to see gas prices rise, and by comparison, and indeed possibly in absolute terms, renewable prices will get lower and lower. So investing in renewables probably makes a great deal of business sense, as well as making a great deal of environmental sense.
I don't really know. I agree that prices have gone up recently because of the increase in gas prices. But if you look forward, even using government figures and other estimates, they're a bit fuzzy. But I think we're going to see prices increase because of the support for renewable technologies. It's an essential step we must take, move to a low carbon agenda, but we're talking about £200, £300 a household by 2020, extra because we're moving to this supporting renewables. And we need gas and renewables. We need nuclear as well. Yeah. We need all of the energy. So it's not a choice of gas
but
versus
as I understand
wind.
it, globally and even in Europe, there have been more discoveries of gas and more discoveries of usable gas, which raises the question, why, therefore, has, in real terms, the cost of gas been going up?
Well, I think that that's historical over the last 2 or 3 years. If you're looking forward now and predicting what gas prices are going to be in 5, 10, 15 years is an art. I've done a lot of that, and it's a very difficult art.
Well, do you think it's going to come down?
I think it's just as likely to come down. I don't recognise this concept that gas prices will automatically go up. We're in a global world with a massive oversupply of gas. Demand will grow as well.
But the gas is on the whole, a long way away, and it's a transport cost, it's a liquefaction costs, all of those things have a massive impact. If we're talking about both energy security and climate change, we are so much better off generating as much of our own electricity as we can from renewables within our own borders.
That's fair enough, as long as we don't make ourselves completely anti-competitive for everyone else. If we're the only shining beacon for renewable technology with very high prices.
Well, at the moment, we're having the opposite effect. We're holding everybody else back.
We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you both very much indeed.
Pleasure.
More now on that shooting in Lucerne in